Hello, good afternoon, good morning, and good evening. 'Cause somewhere around the world, that's what time it is. Like Sunday, and I said that I will be taking Sundays off, but I lied to you. That's what time it is. Today, I wanted to get into a little bit of who is George Soros and a little bit of what the deep state is. A lot of people seeing my Instagram posts and they're like, who is this George Soros guy they keep talking about? George Soros is a billionaire Nazi that's been funding the left wing's bullshit in the media. You already know though. Before we get into that, we gotta get into this. Please do remember that the New Right Party channel and the New Red Party show is sponsored by patriots like you. And as long as you're sending these donations, it allows me to create the content that will continue to make these motherfuckers sick. As you were.
He's on fire! Versus the family and my family entertainment and his team no sleep. Flossy high and yeah we made it. On the songs that we be making and I heard they want my soul Illuminati wanna take it. Versus the family and my family entertainment and his team no sleep. Flossy high and yeah we made it. The haters keep on hating on the songs that we be making and I heard they want my soul Illuminati wanna take it.
CEO, bullshit, paying for the pussy, I endorse it, riding through the city, that's my off.
Sack Jugaloo. Sack Jugalo. Shout out to Lou. Shout out to you. Sack Jugalo, shout out to you. Lady Loca 66, shout out to you. Traumaville, shout out to you. Guest, shout out to you. Tex Mike, shout out to you. We're gonna get into it. I'm eating some vegan pizza. I got one slice left. And then I'm gonna get in and start breaking this shit down to you. But I'm gonna get in periodically and stop this piece of shit from talking. This is George Soros, people. Let's get into it.
24 hours away from the inauguration of the 45th president of the United States. Where does he stand in an open society?
Well, I have described him as an imposter and
open society. That means one world government. Listen to what the reporter, a globalist, on Bloomberg Network
Bloomberg is a globalist. And look what she's asking of this globalist. And look how wrong he was. Listen. Because this is what he's done to other countries. He's openly come out and he's openly said that he wants to destroy this country. He said it. He's done it in Russia. He's done it in the UK and Canada. We're going to get to this guy. He promotes fear to fuck up the stock market so he can fuck up people's economies.
Con man and a would-be dictator. But he's only a would-be dictator because
people laughed just now at that comment. They wasn't laughing because he was right. They was laughing at him.
Confident that the Constitution and the institutions of
this sick reptilian bastard does not believe in our Constitution. He's not even a United States citizen.
America of the United States are strong enough. The division of power is in operation, and he would.
The division of power is in operation. The division of power is in operation. Meaning those in power we are already working with to divide the rest of them. Listen to what he's saying.
Be dictator if he could get away with it, but he won't be able to.
Because he will be stopped at what point if he goes too far?
That's right.
In foreign policy or domestic policy?
In both areas.
If he goes too far, George Sorros is not a United States citizen. George Sorros doesn't walk amongst regular citizens. George Sorros doesn't ask regular citizens what they think. But this devil will tell you what's good for you. He watched in horror as he was between the ages of 14 to 18 as Germans killed Jews. Him being a Jew, he watched as this happened. He understood that the Nazis had a pure goal of world domination. He has never stopped pursuing the goal of the Nazis. Anyone getting money from George Soros is part of the problem.
Obviously, in foreign policy, he has greater powers than in domestic policy. But I think Congress will be a bulwark protecting its rights. And when Trump oversteps the mark.
The one thing I know is if someone has something to say, they will not stutter as much as this piece of shit has. Trying to make up things or find words he can make up on the fly, try to make it seem correct.
They will fight back. And if they have a bipartisan coalition, they will actually succeed in limiting him.
As you can see, everything he said is a lie.
The markets for the moment seem to be behind Donald Trump. It lost you a lot of money. What are they seeing?
Well, they are facing really a unique victory because they are in control of the presidency of effectively Congress and. Well, it's not official of the Supreme Court as well.
So this is the Republicans, but what about the markets? The markets.
Yeah, well,
the stock.
He's so old and fucked up. He was still trying to push political talking points instead of answering the fact that the markets are not behind you. They're not. He's lost millions of dollars. Millions. Going against Donald Trump.
Markets.
Well, because the markets see Trump dismantling regulations and reducing taxes.
That sounds good.
And that has been their dream. So their dream has come true.
What does it mean for the U.S. economy?
That's a very open question because right now the uncertainty is at a peak because it's impossible to predict exactly how Trump is going to act.
I'll tell you, the stock market will reach a Guinness Book World Record 8 highs. It will set one Guinness Book of World Record. Then it will beat his own record. Then it will beat his own record again. Then he'll beat his record again. Then he'll beat his record again. Then it will beat his record again. He'll beat his record again. And again. That's how Trump's going to react. So when it came to that his forecast over the market was wrong, and he'd be wrong, he transferred $18 billion to his Open Society Foundation.
To work as hard as he can against President Trump and his agenda. The left wing.
He's lost $1 billion with Hillary. He's pumped in $18 billion to the Open Society Foundation.
Billionaire transferring $18 billion to his Open Society Foundation. That makes it the second largest foundation in the country, and it's all about politics. Sorros lost $1 billion.
You wondering where some of this $18 billion came from? What about the $10 billion that was stolen from Haiti? You're looking at the direct architect in this breakdown.
Dollars because he bet against Donald Trump, his election, and the market, and he obviously he had little use for conservatives even before that. Joining me now, Matt Slaff, chairman of the American Conservative Union. Matt, good to have you with us. Let's start.
Great to be here, Lou.
Let's start with. We'll get to all of the day's political developments, but
$18 billion transferred to the Open Society Foundation. People are clamoring for this money so they can destroy their government.
George Sorros, his father, was a successful lawyer. He lived on an island in the Danube and liked to commute to work in a rowboat. But knowing there were problems ahead for the Jews, he decided to split his family up. He bought them forged papers, and he bribed a government official to take 14-year-old George Sorros in and swear that he was his Christian.
Who knows if he really was 14? He could be lying.
God's son. But survival carried a heavy price tag. While hundreds of thousands of Hungarian Jews were being shipped off to the death camps, George Sorros accompanied his phony godfather on his appointed rounds, confiscating property from the Jews. These are pictures from 1944 of what happened to George Soros's friends and neighbors. You're a Hungarian Jew who escaped the Holocaust by posing as a Christian.
Right.
And you watched lots of people get shipped off to the death camps.
Right. I was 14 years old. And I would say that that's when my character was made.
In what way?
He's
that
selling
one should
out.
think ahead, one should understand and anticipate events, and one is threatened. It was a tremendous threat of evil. I mean, it was
That's not, he's trying to make it, this is his character. His character is this. His character is that he's ashamed that he had to watch helplessly as his fellow countrymen and people were being killed. It crushed him to know that he was directly involved in their destruction. He had absolutely no control over it. So what is he doing now? This man is making sure the whole world feels his pain. He wants to turn the whole world upside down, and he wants the whole world to experience what he himself had to experience. He is paying Democrats to sell out their own communities, the Barack Obamas, the Hillary Clintons. It doesn't matter. The Andrew Gilliams. He's paying them to sell out their communities so they can watch their people get marched into fucking ovens. This is the greatest breakdown you're ever going to hear in its simplest form. What he's doing to us was done to him. And now that he has enough money, so it can't happen to him no more, so he feels. He's making sure that other people feels his pain. He wants the world to pay for it.
Very personal experience of evil.
My understanding is that you went out with this protector of yours who swore that you were his adopted godson.
Yes.
Went out, in fact, and helped in the confiscation of property from the Jews.
That's right.
I mean, that sounds like an experience that would send lots of people to the psychiatric couch for many, many years. Was it difficult?
Not at all. Not at all. Maybe as a child you don't see the connection, but it created no problem at all.
No feeling of guilt.
No.
For example, that I'm Jewish, and here I am watching these people go. I could just as easily be there. I should be there. None of that.
Well, of course, I could be on the other side, or I could be the one from whom the thing is being taken away. But there was no sense that I shouldn't be there, because that was, well, actually, funny way, it's just like in markets that...
There's a funny way that he's going to tell you it's funny how he watched his brothers and sisters and countrymen be thrown in ovens, and now he's going to compare it to the stock exchange.
If I weren't there, of course I wasn't doing it, but somebody else would.
And that's how he tells you he's right. Because if he wasn't doing it, someone else would have been. He'd rather have been him.
Would be taking it away anyhow. In other words, whether I was there or not, I was only a spectator. The property was being taken away. So I had no role in taking away that property. So I had no sense of guilt.
Are you religious?
No.
Do you believe in God?
No.
No.
Sorros told us he believes God was created by man, not the other way around, which may be why he thinks he can smooth out the world's imperfection. Like Carnegie, J.P. Morgan, and the Rockefellers, he amassed billions through ruthless business decisions. He can move world financial markets simply by voicing an opinion or destabilize.
That's why he tried to voice a bad opinion about Donald Trump before his inauguration.
A government by buying and selling its currency. But now George Soros is worried. He thinks the global economy is coming apart at the seams, and that the world...
What he thinks is the world is waking up to the banksters, and soon they won't have the control that they had before, and he's correct, because they don't.
Needs to be protected from people like George Soros.
We may now think that everything is fine, but the fact is that the system is broke and it needs fixing.
What you're doing...
It needs more regulations so they can put people in direct chains. Instead of making it financial, they can make it physical. Because they're making it physical indirectly. They're forcing you to have to pay in order to feed yourself when it comes to if you want to hunt or fish. Just regular shit.
Is asking some form of regulation to protect the world against you.
Well, I am a player, and I think all players should be regulated. There have to be rules of the game.
Right now, his Quantum Group hedge fund moves $14 billion of rich investors' money around the world every day.
Who's these rich investors? Globalists. Globalists. Globalists who do not want to be hindered by the responsibility of regulations for big banksters so they're not ripping people off. So they deal with his company who operates outside the United States in its regulations so they can then affect Americans, rip us off, and take away our country.
Looking for profits and answering to no one. Soros makes huge bets on whole countries and economies. Last year, when he saw cracks in the Asia boom, he began selling the currency in Thailand. Traders in Hong Kong followed suit, triggering a financial crisis that plunged much of Asia into a depression.
In the last 2 years, you've been blamed for financial collapse of Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Japan, and Russia.
All of the above.
All of the above.
Yeah.
Soros says the Asian currencies would have collapsed even if he hadn't been in the market. They were overvalued. He says people tend to follow his lead because he's been so successful.
I think that I've been blamed for everything. I am basically there to make money. I cannot and do not look at the social consequences of what I do.
Soros wrote a letter to the Financial Times of London saying
he does not look at the social consequences of what he does.
He thought the Russian currency should be devalued by as much as 25%. A few words from Soros were enough to cause panic selling that fueled the crash.
What's it like to have a statement that you make have such serious, grievous consequences? I mean, you can, it looks to me like in a number of situations, you can take a position against a currency or make a statement, and the whole country falls apart.
Well, it's a tremendous sense of responsibility, actually.
Like what he's trying to do right now with funding these militia groups with bastard babies to march their asses on their way up here, so he can flood our country with unwanted fucking illegals, and then he can devalue our currency and start to sell our currency off to make it seem as if America's lost.
Actually, and it's also a humbling experience because I am actually trying to do the right thing, and sometimes what I do has an unintended negative consequence.
Last month, he brought the First Lady with him for a look at some of the projects his foundation is funding.
This is Mr. George Sorros, and he's going to be helping the hospital.
At the center of George Soros, there's an inherent contradiction.
Do you see that?
Which is?
Which is, on one hand, you're the capitalist who does not care about the social consequences of his act, and on the other hand, you are a philanthropist who cares only about social consequences. Which George Soros am I talking to now? The amoral George Soros or the moral George Soros?
It's one person. It's one person who at one time engages in amoral activities and at the rest of the time tries to be moral. Whether I or somebody else does whatever is happening in the markets, it really doesn't make any difference to the outcome. I don't feel guilty because I'm engaged in an amoral activity which is not meant to have anything to do with guilt.
Part of the reason he is so rich is that the Soros hedge funds operate offshore in the Netherlands Antilles to avoid scrutiny by the Securities and Exchange Commission.
So if he had nothing to hide, why would he need to not be registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission? Why would he need to go all the way to the Netherlands to conduct his business? If he's so upstanding, if what he's doing is amoral, why would he have to find himself circumventing the United States in order to do business with us?
So even while Soros tells Congress, and
this is a direct contradiction. So the thing is, no one is saying you're saying this, but what you're doing is not amoral at all. You should be ashamed of yourself. You're stealing money from people, from their countries, their resources, and then you say that you're doing humanitarian work when you decide to give some of the shit back that you stole from these people in the fucking first place.
And the Treasury, that hedge funds must be regulated to stop the global crisis, he's avoiding the rules. Why is it that that Americans can't invest in the quantum fund? It's an offshore fund. Why is that?
Because the fund is not registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission.
You hear that? So when the Open Society Foundation receives billions of dollars from this $18 billion from this old piece of shit, because you know he's about to be on his way out. So you need to find out who his successor is, and that's the next person that needs to be stopped. We need to start getting on these people ahead of the time, getting at the head of the curve to put an end to it, because they're all well aware of what's taking place. They all understand what it is that's happening now, and they don't want it to happen because then they'll lose their power, they'll lose their protection. It's over for them. It's over for all of them.
We are not
licensed to do business in the United States.
That's right.
No, you're not, because you're a fucking criminal, and we need to lock his ass up. Now we need to get into something, because what you hear all the time is there's no such thing as a deep state. And today, we're going to debunk that shit. I wanted to talk about George Soros in the opening, because I wanted you to understand who does it always involve? George Soros. Who will it always come back to? George Soros. When you're looking for someone to blame, you can definitely always look to George Soros. Let's get into this right now. Let's see how we can find George Soros in the mix of the deep state.
What did the president mean when he said the deep state Justice Department? And does this administration believe that the deep state is a real thing, that there is this shadow?
The first attempt of mainstream media to cover the fact that they're Nazis, that they are the deep state.
Shadow government out there actively plotting to sabotage him?
What is deep state? Is it near Dollywood? Because I'm in, if it is. And
another puppet used by what some will call the Illuminati, the New World Order, or the deep state, to redirect and turn it into a joke like they did with the word Illuminati. Turn it into an afterthought, turn it into something with no significance whatsoever. And this is what they're doing with this term.
Both the current guy in the White House and his son have been tweeting about the so-called deep state, which is a conspiracy theory that government employees loyal to Obama and Hillary are working behind the scenes to derail his presidency.
See how she tried to laugh and play it off to make it seem like it's not real? As if it doesn't exist? But every American with a fucking brain sees that the FBI has fired so many of their top-level employees due to them illegally wiretapping then candidate Donald Trump, to them illegally having an investigation on now President Donald Trump. Shows that all of these people involved are tied to the Clintons. Everything done comes back to the Clintons. I'm getting to the point where I'm getting so fed up with Congress. If they don't start arresting people, I'm going to just start throwing them in the same pot with the rest of these motherfuckers. Because screaming about it and doing nothing means nothing. You're supposed to fight for Americans. You're supposed to be up there fighting for American people. That way we don't come up here. That way we don't run down there in drones and start dragging motherfuckers out of them motherfucking offices and buildings and start ripping their fucking limbs off. That's why we elect you. So you go in there and you take care of this shit. We're tired of this shit. Man the fuck up. Get in there. Drain this fucking swamp.
Supporters of Trump, including Breitbart News, are now accusing the intelligence agencies of attempting to wage a deep state coup against the president. Meanwhile, some critics of Trump are openly embracing such activity, like Bill Kristol, the prominent Republican analyst who founded the Weekly Standard. He wrote on Twitter, obviously strongly prefer normal democratic and constitutional politics, but if it comes to it, prefer the deep state to the Trump state.
You
hear that?
take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you.
You think you could...
You see that? Do you hear the bullying tactics? If you take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways a Sunday to get back at you. Because they can just make up anything they want whenever they want to. Anything they want whenever they want to. We have no power unless we start to take it back.
Push us off this because you can try to intimidate the director. You better think again, Mr. President. You've been around for 13 months. We've been around since 1908. I know how this game is going to be played. We're going to win.
Do you hear that? A threat. A threat. We've been around since 1908. Straight Nazis. Straight fucking Nazis. Get him, Tucker.
Okay, I will say this, because it's a message I've got from people from the CIA. I know a lot of officers. I know a lot of agents. I've been in their homes, and they're really delivering this to you and to Donald Trump. These are people who have sacrificed a lot for this country. They go through into the CIA every day. They walk past that wall with 117.
I get it. What's the message?
As a former government official, government's going to kill this guy.
If now, because he...
Government is going to kill this guy. The deep state government is going to kill this guy. You got to listen, people.
He's the nominee for the party, and he's entitled to briefings from the CIA, for example. I said publicly, give him fake briefings. Pretend you're briefing. Don't tell him anything.
Look,
give him fake briefing so he cannot officially act in his capacity and protect Americans.
I think Obama was just as much a victim of this as Trump is now. Obama didn't come into office wanting to overthrow governments, but he overthrew Libya. He assisted in overthrowing.
He came into office wanting to overthrow governments, and he wanted to overthrow the United States government as well.
Throwing Assad, and we were involved in the overthrow in the Ukraine. We're still occupying the Middle East. These were not initiatives that Obama had when he was elected, but I think he got pulled by the military-industrial complex and the intelligence community into these positions. He even helped cover up Saudi Arabia's involvement in 9/11.
What the hell is the deep state? Everybody's talking about the deep state.
What in the malarkey is a deep state? It seems like this is the buzzword of the week.
This theory of the deep state. But this, I mean, based on what the Oxford Dictionary says, which is, it's a body of people, typically influential members of government agencies or the military, believed to be involved with the secret manipulation or control of government policy.
Yeah.
Is this like scandal? If this was real, if this was real, do you think he'd still be a sitting president right now?
Well, it's tougher now. And they have dumb bitches like you on television to try to make it appear as if it's not real. Here's a new flash for you. If there is a definition to describe a word, it's real. Words are given to actions, in most cases, and or events to describe them. It told this bitch what it is to be in the deep state. And she tried to make it seem as if it's not possible. Tell that to JFK. Tell that to JFK Jr. Tell that to Robert Kennedy. Then you have this dumbass bitch with her natural hair, and they fluff it and they do or whatever the fuck they can to try to make it seem as if these bitches are knowledgeable. They're not. This bitch Whoopi Goldberg is wearing fake dreads since I can fucking remember. That bitch has never wore her hair. This is all been a ploy in the guise, sitting there with her fat, sloppy, stink ass. It's been a ploy. It's been a guise to sit there and make you think that somehow she is Afrocentric, and she can give a fuck about you, about me, about any one of us. This bitch is sold out a long time ago. She was butt ugly as fuck in a time in Hollywood where the prettiest bitches had to give up pussy and suck some dick to get some roles. If you don't think this bitch had the train ran on her multiple times, you out your fucking mind. You mean to tell me she came up in the era when Bill Cosby was popping fucking Quaaludes in bitches' mouths like Altoids, but somehow they wasn't running down on this ugly bitch, and she was getting movie roles? She licked Patrick Swayze balls and ass in order to be in Ghost. She probably sucked Demi Moore's ass too. Call it for how it is. Nowhere in the world this bitch comes up in the era of these fucking casting couches and everybody fucking these actresses. That I am sold on the fact that most actresses you ever seen that you thought was wholesome, if they wasn't already married to the director of the movies they was in, they gave up some pussy. They fucked the shit out of Whoopi Goldberg. They probably made her lick all type of dog, dick, and all type of fucked up shit. This bitch has been sold her soul. Then you got this little skinny bitch sitting next to her with this clown fucking shirt on. I'll just tell you, they just dress them as just as fucked up as they possibly can. And they try to get this bitch on there and try to make it seem like she's young and she's wholesome. When she's sitting there and she's listening to this bitch spin everything with the dumbest smirk on her face. She absolutely doesn't know what the fuck is going on. She's just there to talk. She's just there to face. As if most of them bitches there aren't. They all are.
I mean, every time I turn on the TV, they're talking about the deep state. My friends are talking about the deep state. I don't know what the deep state is. I think I do.
He know now, though. If you've seen his recent videos, you see he know now.
Is that a conspiracy thing? Is that one of those tinfoil hat things?
The former deputy director of the FBI, and parenthetically Mueller's deputy, confirmed in an interview last week the existence of the deep state and gave us a rare view as to how these guys think and what's going on. His name is Phil Mudd, and he served as deputy director to former FBI director Robert Mueller, the number 2 guy in the FBI. He said that the government is going to kill this guy.
As a former government official, government's going to kill this guy.
Meaning Trump. That's a direct quote. He said that the Trump's defense of Russian President Vladimir Putin has compelled federal employees at Langley, Foggy Bottom, CIA, and state to try to take Trump down.
Washington, D.C. is not really run by elected officials. It's run by bureaucrats, the contractors, the surveillance communities, the police agencies. And of course, over the years, that's actually grown now to where you have the Department of Homeland Security, which came into being after 9/11.
Let me tell you how easy this was done. If you've ever been to Washington, D.C., and you've been to a major metropolis, you understand that Washington, D.C. is relatively very, very, very small. Its architecture has remained the same. In fact, when me and Shannon was driving in D.C., I had a moment because I was drifted back, into the 1900s from all the buildings. Those buildings are all part of our history. Legislative members have walked in some of those buildings, and some people may never know about it. But it's small. It's small. It's easy to get information in. It's easy to bug places. It's easy to set up surveillance. It's easy. So politicians stay in this small, easy place, and everything they do is caught up. You're damn right. It's easy to do it there.
The massive NSA, CIA operations that are spying on everything Americans do. Nothing is private anymore. That's being realized. What we call the government, Washington, D.C., is really not the government. In other words, when you vote and you elect someone, you're not really electing the government that runs things. There's a deeper government there, is something which has been called the deep state.
An obscure, invisible group of core members of the establishment pulling the strings behind the scenes, working together, conspiring to make sure that they always get their way. Many people point to bureaucrats, government officials, retired officials, globalists, corporatists, secret societies, legislators, contractors, and even media personalities who manipulate and defend established government status quo policy as the foot soldiers in this deep state. And to me, this manipulation is exemplified every 4 years during presidential elections in the United States, especially around the topic of foreign policy. Many people don't know this, but George W. Bush ran as a non-interventionist, an isolationist in 2000. Barack Obama promised similar policies and ran on the ideas of peace, hope, and fricking change. Meanwhile, both have come out as bloodthirsty warhawks pushing failed foreign policy objectives that are ridiculously dumb and hurt our country, continuing those policies as if nothing has changed.
This white guy is smart.
Changed with every new president.
What are you talking about? I read the paper. I get USA Today. I get CNN. What are you talking about?
Do you have any people being paid by the CIA who are contributing?
You know, I've showed this before on a prior show, but we're going to have to see it again.
To a major circulation American journal. We do have people who submit pieces to American journals. Do you have any people paid by the CIA who are working for television networks? This, I think, gets into the kind of getting into the details, Mr. Chairman, that I'd like to get into in executive session.
This parallel government, rogue government, shadow government, state within a state, deep state. What the hell are you people talking about?
This is not unique to the United States. The United States learned some of this from the...
There's a tumor that's grown inside the United States, and they can't get rid of it because then if they do, it would expose so many other leaders that are doing criminal shit. And they've been using a certain branch of this government to do illegal shit in interest of the United States. All in all, it wasn't in the interest of the United States. They were doing it in the interest of the New World Order, pretending to do it in the interest of the United States.
British, who learned it in turn during the 19th century, where they were a dominant imperial power around the world. They cut their teeth on this stuff. The other major powers are definitely engaged and capable of these same types of operations. And small powers as well. Israel is an example. The CIA grew out of the OSS during World War II, which had been established during World War II. Its earliest years are interesting because the new president, Harry Truman, did not trust the OSS because he felt it was too dominated by parts of the Democratic Party that he didn't align himself with. So he abolished the OSS. Then they first created a smaller intelligence agency from the remains of the old OSS called the Central Intelligence Group. And that was focused on analyzing intelligence. It wasn't a covert operations agency. About 2 years after that, many of the agents who had worked on the covert operations side, the paramilitary warfare operations, black operations, that sort of thing, were re-established in an outfit called the Office for Policy Coordination. And this office, quote unquote, eventually grew to have about 5,000 agents in the early Cold War years. So the existence of this office was itself entirely top secret. It had no open existence at all. And it wasn't until some years later that the Office of Policy Coordination was folded into the CIA, and the CIA became an agency, I'm talking about the early 1950s now, that openly had both a clandestine black operations arm and an intelligence analysis arm.
The OPC was set up to organize propaganda, economic warfare,
preventive direct action, sabotage, demolition, subversion against hostile states, including assistance to underground resistance groups and support of indigenous anti-communist elements in threatened countries of the free world.
What happened at the end of World War II when Truman disbanded the OSS? The covert operators were in the wilderness for a little while, and some of them had been leading Wall Street bankers and lawyers. And there's a certain logic there, because prior to the war, the people engaged in international trade and international law were a relatively small number of people, and they were the specialists in international affairs for the United States. So, for example, the man who was later to become chief of covert operations, black operations for the CIA, was a man named Frank Wisner, quite a prominent Wall Street lawyer. The man who later became the director of the CIA was Allen Dulles. His career prior to World War II was basically in international
who Kennedy fired because of the Bay of Pigs.
Law and cutting deals of one sort or another with trade partners around the world. Some of the trade partners included fascists, some aspects of Nazi Germany or companies associated with Nazi Germany, Italy,
Nazi Germany.
Prior to the war in World War II in Poland, there had been a military dictatorship, a very authoritarian country. Allen Dulles was made part of his living by helping to finance deals that kept that government in power. And there's many other examples along the same lines. During the war, they went into covert operations for the U.S. government because they had some expertise in dealing with foreign countries. After the war, they went back to Wall Street for a short time. And then by the late 1940s, they were back in the intelligence complex, in the two examples that I mentioned, in leadership and management type roles.
From the beginning.
And the only thing that I find satisfying about everything right now is that he's dead. And everyone that was with him is dead. But I'm saddened by the fact that their offspring currently furthering their agenda.
The CIA was steeped in elitism. Its top leadership was made up mostly of Wall Street lawyers, while new recruits were sought through the top Ivy League universities. Gaddis Smith, a history professor at Yale, remarked that Yale has influenced the Central Intelligence Agency more than any other university, giving the CIA the atmosphere of a class reunion.
Does the military engage such task forces of undercover operatives to carry out off-the-record missions? The answer to that question is yes.
Hell yes.
That answer comes from a number of sources, including Colonel L. Fletcher Prouty. As a colonel in the U.S. Air Force and Chief of Special Operations for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Prouty worked from 1955 to 1964 as the liaison procuring military supplies, equipment, and logistics support for CIA Special Operations worldwide. In his 1973 tell-all, The Secret Team, Prouty discussed the inner workings of America's intelligence community, noting, "Sheep-dipped is an intricate Army-devised process by which a man who is in the service as a full-career soldier or officer agrees to go through all the legal and official motions of resigning from the service. Then, rather than actually being released, his records are pulled from the Army personnel files and transferred to a special Army intelligence file. Substitute, but nonetheless real-appearing records are then processed, and the man leaves the service. He is encouraged to write to friends and give a cover reason why he got out. He goes to his bank and charge card services and changes his status to civilian, and does the hundreds of other official and personal things that any man would do if he really had gotten out of the service. Meanwhile, his real Army records are kept in secrecy, but not forgotten." This tactic was used, for example, in Project Heavy Green during the U.S. military participation in Vietnam in the 1960s. Restricted from deploying troops in Laos by the 1962 Geneva Accords, 48 Air Force personnel were instead sheep-dipped and deployed in Laos as civilian employees of Lockheed. to serve as a bombing radar installation there.
Further on, concerning the realization of the Dulles Jackson Correa's report's method of placing CIA agents throughout the government, quote, "Many of these people who have reached positions of great responsibility, I believe that the most powerful and certainly the most useful agent the CIA has ever had operates in just such a capacity within another branch of the government, and he has been there for so long that few have any idea that he is a long-term career agent of the CIA. Through his most excellent and skillful services, more CIA operations have been enabled to take place than can be laid at the feet of the agency, at the feet of any other, more legitimate agent. This was the plan and the wisdom of the Dulles idea from the beginning. On the basis of security, he would place people in all areas of the government, and then he would move them up and deeper into their cover jobs, until they began to take a very active part in the role of their own organizations. This is how the ST was born, the secret team. Today, the role of the CIA is performed by an ad hoc organization that is much greater in size, strength, and resources than the CIA has ever been visualized to be." So the first question I have here would be, how, quote, on the basis of security, unquote, would Allen Dulles, quote, place people in all other areas of the government?
Well, one of the first things that I realized was that it was Mr. Dulles' desire to have the office that General White asked me to create in the Air Force headquarters in order to create a focal point system. And as Mr. Dulles told me later, he said, "I don't want various people from my agency going into the Pentagon and dealing with different people there, and therefore uncovering the activities of the CIA to a large number of people, because obviously such a ring would then proliferate to others, and if they wanted submarines, they have to bring in some Navy people, and if they wanted helicopters, they have to talk to some Army people." He said, "I want a focal point. I want an office that's cleared to do what we have to have done, an office that knows us very, very well, and then an office has access to a system in the Pentagon, but the system will not be aware of what initiated the request. They'll think it came from the Secretary of Defense. They won't realize it came from the Director of Central Intelligence." So you see, the Dulles philosophy was to control the focal point area. This led then to the creation of focal point offices everywhere. And as I established this Tab 6 organization, we called it, in every major staff area within the Air Force, because that was my jurisdiction at the time, I would have cleared people, another focal point, you might say a sub-focal point, a person I could go to who had been given ahead of time the authority to do whatever it was that he was authorized to do. And we stressed that authorized business. He would have to be sure he had orders either from my office or directly up to the Chief of Staff, and that we knew what we were doing for CIA. Well, this leads to another step, you might call.
So if you're Donald Trump, you understand that you are up against this. That's brave.
Breeding. We had to work with various agencies of the government, not just the Defense Department. We had to have contact points in the State Department, in the FAA, and the Customs Service, and the Treasury, and the FBI, and all around through the government, up in the White House. And gradually we wove a network of people who understood the symbols and the code names and the things we were doing and how we handle money, which was the most important thing. And then we began to assign people there who those agencies thought were from the Defense Department, but they actually were people that we put there from the CIA. This led to the creation of a system of powerful individuals, people whose jobs were quite dominant in some of these other agencies, especially after they'd been there 2 or 3 years, because we put them in there by talking to the top man, the cabinet officer or the head of the agency, and we'd say, this man is being placed here so that he can facilitate covert activities, and so that he can retain the secrecy that's required, and he will keep you informed at all times. Well, in the bureaucracy, the top people move faster than anybody else, not the bottom people. And so the man we had explained that to maybe a year and a half earlier would be transferred or leave the government, but our man is still there. So one or two cycles of that, and that agency might not even know that guy was there anymore. They would, and I mean, what his origins were. They would think he was just another one of their own employees. And as a result, he became extremely effective because if we wanted something done, I remember a rather very sensitive operation that I needed some information on, and I needed it from the FBI. I didn't go to the FBI. I went to this guy that we had planted, and he got it twice as fast and in a much better form than I would have gotten from the FBI. Even though I was at that time working from the Office of Secretary of Defense, we had no trouble working with the FBI. It was just to facilitate it. These people became very, very adept. By the same token, people that were employees of CIA agents were assigned, even in the Office of the Secretary of Defense. We had certain people there who were CIA employees. Ed Lansdale worked for CIA all his adult career. A person named Frank Hand worked there. Now, the people in the Pentagon thought they were ordinary military employees. They didn't realize. Well, just to give you an example, Colonel Lansdale was a full colonel in the Air Force. That was his cover story. And he had been a full colonel for a few years. And the Air Force was promoting some men to general. Question came up, would Lansdale be eligible? And I told Mr. Dulles personally, I said, you can make Lansdale a general if you just write a letter to General LeMay, because you're going to pay the bills anyway, and not the Air Force. A few days later, I got a call from General LeMay's office. He called me in, and he had the list of men that the Air Force was promoting to general. And as I recall, it was only 13 or 14 officers, and LeMay, being General LeMay, knew every one of them except one. I know who the hell he is. I'm not going to promote him to a general. And I said, well, don't you have a file on him? He said, yes. He opened it up, and the top letter was from Allen Dulles. I said, he's a very important man for Allen Dulles. It's okay, I'll promote him. Just like that. Well, that's a good way to get a promotion, you see. But that created a very important job within the structure of the Office of Secretary of Defense. Frank Hand had been there for years.
See how easy that just went down?
In the same way. Frank was a civilian of... I always wrote that he was the most important agent that the agency had, because he was operating daily and effectively as a member of the Office of Secretary of Defense. And you can think of the things that a person in that capacity can do when his home base really is CIA. Well, although people didn't believe this when they first heard it, there are assignments like that in the White House. There are assignments like that in the State Department. It's hard to tell the difference, you might say, between Bill Bundy, who was a longtime CIA employee, and McGeorge Bundy, who was in the White House with Kennedy. The two brothers certainly want to act side by side. They have the same goals and the same intentions. Well, there were many things that duplicated like that. So that it wasn't long before, and I'd say by the end of the 50s, early 60s, before we had spread through the government what I called a secret team, a group of people who really knew how to operate the CIA business. So when I say that this team was quite effective, it was very effective, very strong, handled a lot of money, worked all over the world. Thousands of people were involved. And I know one time when I was speaking to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, at that time General Lemnitz.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to post this full video link in the chat for those that may want to watch the whole entire thing. My point of me playing this, I'm going to get a little bit more into it. My point of me playing this is I need you to understand that
It is designed for clandestine operations all over the world. And it goes back again to things
this is far more crazier than you thought it was. Donald Trump is dealing with a global threat. The deep state is real. Full link is in the description. I don't have all day. It's Sunday. I want to thank everybody for being here. I don't want to rant and curse too much. You know, Sunday. Some people are coming from church, and people, you know, I just don't want to promote that kind of energy. But what I did want to accomplish was the introduction of George Sorros and the introduction of the deep state. Watch the link. The link is in the description. I went in there and I put it in there. Feel free to, the moderators, feel free to copy the link and paste it, and that way more people can see it. It's not lost in the chat. Make sure you copy and paste it within it. The whole point of these illegals coming was for the deliberate act of trying to overthrow the United States government. And that's what those illegals represent if we let them into this nation. What it will do is it will create a global disinterest in America. The World Bank will then start to call in on debts. It will cripple our nation. George Soros is trying his best not to go broke, destroying us. And we need to be the one nation out of all of those nations that they named that was smart enough to defeat one whole. Forget the other side. You know we don't care. But